All right. I wish I could avoid it, but we're going to have to get political today. I know most of you do not give a fuck about my political beliefs, but I promise you this particular issue does have a direct impact on the video game industry. So I'm not going to be like these YouTubers, these gaming YouTubers like Angry Joe and Boogie and these other big YouTubers that you really only subscribe to them for gaming content, but they like to include their political anecdotes and you don't really care. But they dehumanize people who think differently from them, and they're just assholes in my opinion. But I'm not going to be like that. I don't really care what your political beliefs are. I don't care if you're on the far left, the far right, the center left, the center right. If you're, it doesn't matter to me. If you're a conservative, a liberal, Republican, Democrat, it makes absolutely no difference to me. I think we're all human beings here. I think we can all discuss issues in a civil manner. We don't need to call each other names. We don't need to pretend that one side is good, the other side is bad. Like there's some type of moral black and white when it comes to a lot of these political issues. I don't think people who have a difference of opinion when it comes to the issue of trade and tariffs is a worse human being as a result. This is a complicated issue. There are people from all sides that have reasoning behind why they take that position, why they support free trade, why they support regulated trade. This is a very complicated issue, and I don't think a gaming channel can do it any justice. But I'm kind of going to try to explain it to the best of my ability, so you at least understand the implications that this would have on the video game industry itself. Because this would shake up the video game industry quite a bit if it is enacted. And this, of course, is a 25% tariff on video game related products. So video game consoles, controllers, even board games, which aren't video games, but just gaming related products that are related to games that are manufactured in China. So as most of you are aware, there is a huge trade dispute going on between the United States and China. For the past 20, 30 years or so, the United States has pretty much had a laid back approach when it comes to trade, loosening up trade regulations and just supporting the notion of free trade. Tariffs used to be very important for the United States economic development for the first, I'd say, 150 years or so of the United States' existence. Before then, there was no such thing as an income tax, so there was no reliable way of collecting taxes and to fund the government and to fund the military. So what the government used to do was to have heavy amounts of tariffs on goods coming from other countries as a way to fund the government, essentially. That was the main way that the government was funded. The government tried to enact a federal income tax as a way, as a better source of revenue, because tariffs were not really reliable as having a federal income tax. So the government was pushing for so long to have a way to tax on income. And there was a lengthy battle in the Supreme Court for quite some time. The Supreme Court initially said an income tax is unconstitutional, but eventually that ruling was reversed. And now we have a federal income tax. So if you ever wonder why money is being deducted from your paycheck, that's because of the Constitution. They actually made it an amendment into the Constitution, and that's the main source of revenue for our government. You ever wonder why the government is shut down, but the IRS is not? The IRS is always well funded, no matter what political party is in power. The IRS always has the resources they need to collect tax revenue, because without tax revenue, everything would fall apart, essentially. And there may be a number of libertarians that may disagree, but that just seems to be the way it is. If you don't have a reliable source of revenue for the government, then most public services would be shut down. There would be no way to reliably fund them, unless we're talking about charity and philanthropy, but that's that's about it, and that's not really reliable. So yeah, a lot of things would cease to function. So you need a reliable source of revenue. So tariffs became a much less important factor in the growth and development of the United States economy, because they had a more reliable tax base, which was their own people instead of foreign countries, because a tariff is essentially a foreign tax, a tax on foreign products coming into this country. But keep in mind, there's another reason why people support tariffs, not just for revenue purposes, but for trade protectionism, which is the notion of protecting our own people and putting the interests of the workers in our own country above those in other countries, because these are our neighbors, these are our friends who are losing their jobs, and these jobs are being outsourced overseas. So that does have an impact on the economy, because although on paper it looks, oh, the economy is doing so well, unemployment is so low, and you see all these numbers, but in reality there are a lot of people in this country who are suffering as a result of these free trade policies. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump was able to connect with these people who seem to have been forgotten, because there was a political consensus among Democrats and Republicans for all these years that free trade is the way to go, because we want to increase prosperity across the world, and whatever their rationale was, it hurt a lot of people, especially in the Rust Belt of the United States, which is states like Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania. Those states were hurt the most, because that is where industry, where factory jobs were really the driving force of the local economies. So when those companies decide to leave and go to other countries, the local economies of these states were just completely decimated. I mean, look at Detroit now compared to 50 years ago. It's completely unrecognizable, and not in a good way. So these states that were reliably Democratic, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that have voted blue for the past 30 years, and people expected this to be a shoo-in for Hillary Clinton, like there would be no way that Donald Trump could win the presidency and carry any of these states, but lo and behold, he becomes the first Republican in 3 decades to carry Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, because he was the only candidate of the major 2 parties that was willing to say, free trade is not working. It's hurting these people. These people's lives are being destroyed because these jobs are being outsourced overseas, and the companies are benefiting from it because they're able to outsource it overseas, and they're able to bring those products back to this country without being penalized and punished for it. So Trump said to these people, you could look up his rallies in Michigan, Wisconsin, all these states. He said, when I am president, I'm going to impose a tariff. I'm going to punish these companies for abandoning American workers. And lo and behold, what does he do? Exactly what he's doing right now. So you can love him or you can hate him. You could support it, you cannot support it, but you have to at least admit he is one of the only candidates that actually lives through his promises, that actually follows what he actually says on the campaign trail. Obama didn't do it. Bush didn't do it. Previous presidents have not done that. And you can absolutely hate everything Trump stands for and his policies, but he's actually following through with those promises. And that can be a significant factor in determining who the next president is. Is Donald Trump going to lose, or are people going to be like, yeah, this guy says what he's going to do. He's going to build that wall. He's going to build the embassy in Jerusalem. He's going to do all these things, and he's done everything that he's promised. So people are going to possibly reelect him. So now the Trump administration is looking to punish console manufacturers for building their consoles in China, because there's been a huge trade imbalance between the United States and China, about $800 billion in China's favor, because goods that come from China to the United States do not get tariffed a lot, not very much, at least before now. But conversely, U.S. goods coming into China are heavily taxed by the Chinese government. So Trump rightfully says that there is a trade imbalance going on between the U.S. and China. And these tariffs are meant as a way to kind of level the playing field, to bring jobs back to the United States, although in practice, in theory, they're more likely to go to other countries that are not the United States, that where costs are a lot cheaper, where cost of labor is a lot cheaper, like Vietnam and all these other countries, than actually going back to the United States. So whether or not that's actually effective can really be questioned, because chances are these companies are going to be more likely to just outsource to other countries that are not China, like Vietnam, before they go back to America, because the cost of labor is a lot cheaper. And we're going to be talking about labor very soon, because there's a lot of hypocrisy going on between people on the left and the right. So I'm not trying to pick sides here. This might have sounded like a whole pro-Trump speech, but I'm just telling you the way things are. He's making his promises, he's keeping his promises, and that promise is to punish China and to try to level out the playing field. The problem is, though, the damage is already done. These free trade policies have caused an imbalance that can never be rebalanced, because China is a huge economic powerhouse at this point. Us imposing tariffs on them might hurt them, but at the end of the day, they become powerful enough that they could probably withstand it. And it's more likely that we are going to hold back on those tariffs and roll them back, because of the immediate effects that it's going to have on the United States are going to be more profound than the impact it will have on China, because there's going to be a lot of political leverage against Trump and against the Republicans for supporting tariffs, because they do have a lot of short-term negative effects on the economy. Just ask the farmers about the tariffs, and they'll tell you that it's not a good situation for them. So Democrats could potentially use this to their advantage, use a lot of the political dissatisfaction against the tariffs, not realizing the bigger picture here, and they would vote Donald Trump and the Republicans out of office, because they're seeing a lot of these negative impacts of tariffs and they're not seeing the benefit. The problem with this type of trade policy, the reason why many politicians before Trump have not even tried to attempt it, is because politicians do not care about the long term, because it's against their own interest to think in the long term, because if they do implement some type of policy that may have some profound negative effects in the short term, but in the long term is a great benefit to the electorate. The thing is, the only thing the electorate cares about is what is going on in their country now, how their lives are now. So if someone else from another political party says we're going to reverse these policies that have hurt you, they're going to vote for that other candidate, because the politics is a short-term game. It's never a long-term game. Politicians never think about 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now. You need to understand, the only thing politicians actually give a shit about is winning re-election. Most of the politicians you see on Capitol Hill, they are career politicians, meaning they use politics and their position of power as their career. A lot of these people were career politicians from the get-go. They studied politics in school, became lawyers with the intention of running for Congress one day. These people had it all planned out from the moment that they were out of the womb, it seems. So these people are not thinking in the long term. They're thinking in the long term in terms of their career and their benefit. But the actual long term of policy making, they don't care about that, because at the end of the day, the electorate cares about the immediate effects of certain actions. If tariffs are having an immediate negative effect on people, chances are, if that's the case, then people are going to vote against Trump next time around. They don't care about what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now. And this is also the same thing with climate change, right? We don't care about what's going to happen to our planet in 50 years, 100 years, when we're all dead. That's not our problem. You know what I'm saying? So I guess it's just human nature to not think too hard into the future. I don't know. But that's definitely a huge problem that our politics currently has. Now back onto the hypocrisy point. Make no mistake about it, both sides are hypocritical here when it comes to the issue of tariffs. At least in relation to the gaming community, because you had a lot of Trump supporters, and as you all know, there are a lot of Trump supporters in the gaming community, and you have a lot of these people who love the whole idea of tariffs, who supported everything the president did, and had nothing bad to say about Donald Trump until he went after their precious video games. Now they're in an uproar. I just think that's absolutely hilarious. They're fine with tariffs until it directly affects them. I think human nature is just being selfish and just caring about yourself, as we just talked about with people just not caring about the future. I just think that that's embedded in our nature, unfortunately. I don't know if there's a way to really fix that, to get people to understand that there is a future and that we need to care about it. It's easier said than done. People care about the now more than the future, more than the past. They care about how much pleasure they're having right now more than anything else. So I just think it's funny how these Trump supporters are all up in arms all of a sudden because their precious video games are going to get a 25% tariff, which means that cost is going to be offset onto you. Video game consoles are going to be significantly more expensive than they had ever been ever before. You know, and this is going to happen overnight, because we're talking about the executive branch here, which means that when the executive does something, that action is going to be happening overnight. It's not like an act of Congress where first it has to go through committee, then it has to go through the House, and then it has to go through Senate, and then the bill gets presented to the president, and the president can pass it, the president can veto it, and if the president vetoes it, they can overturn the veto. It's a huge process, the lawmaking process. But tariffs are not laws. These are executive actions that the president has under the Constitution, so he has every right constitutionally to do this. And there's no legal conflict because he has the power granted to him to do these things. So there's going to be nothing to block him except for voting him out of office if that's what you feel so strongly about. If having taxes on your video games is the one thing that will get you out to the polls, then you really shouldn't be voting. Let's be honest. So that's the hypocrisy on the Trump side. And on the anti-Trump side, we were talking about climate change earlier, right? I love how we're so concerned about climate change, my liberal friends, and we talk about a Green New Deal. We talk about carbon tax and punishing people who use non-renewable resources that contribute to global warming. Yet we're up in arms all of a sudden about Donald Trump ruining video games and him making a tariff on video game consoles. Last time I checked, consumer electronics and video game consoles had a profound impact on climate change, and they have such a huge carbon footprint. If this is an issue you're so concerned about, then wouldn't this be welcome with open arms? But no, you play video games, and you don't want to spend more money on video games because video games are expensive. Consoles are expensive. Controllers are expensive. Having a 25% tariff on that would mean that a $300 console would all of a sudden become a $400 console overnight. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to say that I'm against these tariffs because it directly affects me. And then the same exact people on the left, they support labor unions, they support workers' rights. Specifically when it comes to the video game community, you have a lot of members of the video game community that talk about getting rid of crunch hours, with game developers having 60-hour work weeks and just being treated like shit and having terrible working conditions. We're talking about that, but we're not going to talk about the 5-year-old Chinese children who have their fingers cut off and are living in awful conditions for a child. They're the reason why your consoles, why your iPhone, why your computer, why they are so goddamn cheap. But you never think about them, do you? Because again, humans are self-interested bastards that do not give a shit about anyone else except for themselves. And it's kind of sad. I think this could be exhibited on the left and the right. This is not a political statement. It's just a statement about human nature. And it's the truth. So we won't really know for sure if these tariffs will actually be put forward until June 17th. But at that point, it'll happen immediately. So we will see immediate effects. As soon as next month, we will see a situation possibly of consoles going 25% up in price overnight, essentially, because console manufacturers, they already sell the console at a loss. They're not going to try to keep it the same price. It just would not be sustainable for them. And these companies are not going to move to the United States. So this specific policy, I do not think that it actually helps Americans, because do you think that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are going to decide to move their factories to America? They'll go to Vietnam, or they'll go to Mexico first, or they'll just stay in China. That any of those three options would be more affordable than moving to the United States. Either way, prices are going to go up. And even if these specific tariffs do end up hurting China, I don't see console manufacturers going to the United States. Even if they did decide to do that, either way, prices are going up. Consoles are going to be more expensive. But don't go out and pretend that you care about the rights of workers when you don't care about those 5-year-old Chinese kids who are the reason why your products are cheap in the first place. Let's be real here. So you can say that you want cheap stuff, but at least be consistent with it. Say, yeah, I like having stuff cheaper, and I don't care about anything else. You could just admit that if that's what your position is, and I won't really care. It's just the hypocrisy that really frustrates me to no end. I think tariffs can be a good idea in the long run if politicians actually cared about the long run. The thing about Donald Trump is that he does, because he's not a career politician, and you can love that or hate that, but that's what he's thinking. And Donald Trump and the Trump administration and the Republicans, they don't really care about how much money the video game industry makes or if the video game industry gets hurt. They just seem to think that there's a bigger picture here than just video games. But there's a case to be made. Video game industry is one of the most profitable entertainment industries in the world. And if the industry suffers as a result of this, less people will be able to buy the new consoles because they'll be more expensive. Even current gen consoles will be inaccessible to a lot of people, and this may present a significant problem to the gaming industry. So EA and Activision and all the big companies in the industry, they have a lot of lobbyists in Washington, so they might end up being just fine. The same lobbyists that are going against the loot box bill right now. So maybe they'll win this case, and maybe these tariffs won't even happen. But this is just a hypothetical scenario. If the tariffs were to be enacted, it would spell bad news for the gaming industry as a whole, not just domestically but internationally. And I think China's influence on the gaming industry will just continue to grow and grow and grow as it continues to do so. And I think they just have so much more leverage over us that I don't know if this is a problem that we can really solve practically. And I don't think this is the practical solution to the trade problem that we have going on right now. I think we're just too far in deep. As much as I would like the idea of there being fair trade and people in my own country getting their jobs back, I just think the damage is already done. And as much as I understand where Trump is coming from and why he's doing this, I obviously care a great deal about the gaming industry and I want to see it succeed. So this move could potentially hurt it. I'm not quite sure if this would result in another gaming crash if these tariffs were to take place, but it certainly would not it would not be anything good for the gaming industry. I mean, less people would be able to buy these consoles. That means less of an install base, and that also means less of an install base to buy games. So that's overall not good news for anybody who has any vested interest in the gaming industry, but it definitely is a smart move for the president and his base, because the majority of people who Trump is going at are not like these hardcore gamers that are going to say, I'm not going to vote for Trump because of this. It's probably not a significant portion that would actually hurt him politically, is video game players, because most of these people are kids who don't go out to the polls, and even though the average age of a gamer is like 34, most of these people already have their political opinions anyway, and they're probably not going to be swayed by Donald Trump taxing your video games. Although there may be a handful of morons that are going to be like, oh, my video games are getting taxed, now I'm going to vote against Trump. Like, if that's the only thing it takes you to vote for or against someone, then again, you should not be out in the polls. You are not educated. You are not smart enough to actually make an educated decision on the future of our country. So please stay home if that's what your mindset is. Anyway, I hope this is the last time, hopefully ever, but at least for a good while, that I have to talk about politics on this channel. I try to keep it as fair and down the middle as possible, and that's really how I do things on my political channel. I hate political parties. I hate everything they stand for, but they exist, and they continue to destroy our democracy, and they continue to kill this country completely. This polarization is just awful. I can't stand it. The constant news cycles, and it's just, I'm sick and tired of it. I really am. But if you're interested in my political commentary and analysis, I'll leave the description down below if you're interested. If you're not interested, don't worry. This should be the last time, for at least a long time, that I talk about politics. Although politics never leaves us as much as we want it to. In the case of these issues of diversity in gaming and delving into politics with video games, I remember the big issue of The Division 2, not talking about Trump because they had a wall being built in the Mexico border, and they wanted it to make a statement about Trump, and then Far Cry 5 was not anti-Trump enough. So we do have these political themes being sprinkled along every now and then. But I think the gaming community is also political. You have the PC political party, the Xbox, the PlayStation, Nintendo. Everyone seems to be in some type of camp. So politics is in every aspect of our lives. As much as we want to avoid it, it won't go away, and it's a shame, but that's the way life is. You cannot go one day, it seems, without encountering politics in some type of way. So anyway, that's my piece on on tariffs being implemented on video game consoles. Although we really we really touched upon a lot in this video. I just some people may think I might have got a little too political in this video, but I wanted to explain the issue as best as I could so people understand what's actually going on here, not just like Orange Man evil. Let's vote against him. Let's stand against him because he wants to tax our video games and he's a terrible man. There's a lot more at play than just this. There are so many wide political implications that extend far beyond the gaming industry, but in terms of the gaming industry, this isn't good news. So if the gaming industry is like your main focus, if it's like your favorite thing to do, your favorite pastime is video games, and you already have a hard time affording video games as it is, it's going to be bad for you, and it's going to be bad for the developers, the publishers, and everyone involved. So I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I don't claim to be the all-knowing expert when it comes to this type of stuff, but I think I have a general understanding of what's going on, and I would like to say that it's all around not a good situation. I'm not just talking about tariffs on video games. I really think tariffs in general, it's too little too late, in my opinion. I think it would have been great 30 years ago when all these shenanigans were going on, but I think we're just so in far deep that I don't think trying to level out the playing field would ever work at this point. It's like trying to digging a 6-foot hole and competing in a track race against someone who's on level ground. Like, how are you going to get out of that and be on a level playing field? It just doesn't work. So that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. I'm not trying to indoctrinate my viewers and my listeners on what to think politically. Again, Democrat, Republican, Independent, or if you're a communist or anything, I don't give a shit. I respect every human being, no matter what their beliefs are, as long as you don't advocate for violence against people who you don't like. Then that's when I start to lose respect. But beyond that, no matter what you believe politically, I don't care. I'm not dehumanizing people who love Trump or hate Trump. That's not my place. The video game community is supposed to bring people of all backgrounds together. No matter what you believe politically or where your social background comes from, it's supposed to be that one thing that brings people together. But sadly, there's nothing in this world that brings everyone together, and that's just the way life is.